Someone is. All right, welcome everybody. Check, check, check. My name is George Castro. It is July 17, 2019, and welcome to the monthly Kubernetes office hours. This is our monthly live stream where we basically hop on to YouTube for about an hour with our esteemed panel of experts and try to answer as many of your Kubernetes questions as we possibly can. Those of you watching on YouTube, we have the chat over here. That's #office-hours on slack.kates.io. Do drop in, hop a question. Feel free to say hello. Tell us what you're from. Tell us what you're working on. We love to have the chat live lively while we're doing this. But before we begin, let's do some introductions. Chris, why don't you kick us off?
All right, I'm Chris Carty. I'm a senior developer with DevOps of the City of Ottawa. I head up the Kubernetes implementation and DevOps stuff.
Hi, I'm Pavlos. I'm a software engineer at a company called Utility Warehouse. I'm also a maintainer of Thanos, which is now CNCF Sandbox projects. And I also help with Prometheus online community meetup. So if you're interested, definitely join us.
Hi, I'm Joel Speed. I work for Pusher, based out of London. I'm doing a lot of stuff here. I'm a cloud engineer. We work with Kubernetes a lot. I've been doing a lot of stuff around controllers. At the moment, I'm replacing our CI with Prow. I also maintain a bunch of stuff around authentication and single sign-on. So if you've got questions like that, that's throw them my way.
Hi, my name is Bob Killen. I'm a senior research cloud administrator for the University of Michigan. Sort of my specialty is on-prem deployments and doing other things with federation and crazy networking stuff. We also happen to be, or I happen to be in the same basement with Jeff, if you can hear. You know what, I'm just gonna walk over there.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey Sika. I am a senior research database administrator. Oh my gosh. With the University of Michigan as well. And I do a lot of stuff with CI, the Kubernetes dashboard. I'm on the release team. I'm kind of all over the place. It changes pretty much every month. So yeah, happy to be here and happy to be in George's basement.
All right, is that everyone? Joel, are you next? Has everyone gone? And I'm George Castro. I'll be your host today, also in the same basement as it works out. So before we get started, here's how the rules are going to work. First of all, those of you joining us from YouTube, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. This is a judgment-free zone, so everyone had to start from somewhere. So please remember that the Kubernetes Code of Conduct is in effect in the chat. So while we will do our best to answer your question, the panel doesn't really have access to your cluster. So we kind of consider live debugging and stuff off topic. But what we will do is our best to get you moving for whatever next step is or the next thing that you have to do. So we'll do our best to at least try to get you going down the right path. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on the answers with your experiences and pro tips. Audience, you can help us by pasting URLs to the official docs, blogs, or anything that might be relevant to the topic at hand. I think I learned something from the audience every single time you do one of these. So if we're talking about something and you have links, just whack them into the chat. What I do is I collect all the URLs and publish them with the video at the end of the video so that we have cool things to for the listeners who don't get to listen live, for them to look up and things like that. I think every single time there's always a new tool or something that I haven't seen before. So audience, feel free to participate as we're streaming. Feel free to type in where you're from, what you're working on. We love to do that. If you have a question, just do like question : and what we'll do is add it to our queue of questions, which I will read out, and we will go through as many of them as possible. So hello, Suresh from Hamburg, and hello, Venkat from Cambridge in the United Kingdom. All right, and with that, quick reminder that we are giving away 2 Kubernetes t-shirts today, but you have to wait until the very end. So what we do is if you ask a question, we are going to, you'll automatically be entered in the raffle to win the t-shirt at the end, but you have to wait till the end to win the t-shirt. That's how it works. So feel free to ask a question. So with that, just a real quick word of thanks to our, to some companies here who donate their engineers volunteer time to help us out. So a big shout out to Giant Swarm, StockX, Packet, Pusher.com, Weaveworks, VMware, Lyft, University of Michigan, Utility Warehouse, and the City of Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, for participating in this program and helping us out. If you want to be on this panel, this is all volunteers. So if you're doing a bunch of Kubernetes things and you want to help pay it forward, you can absolutely come up on here. We love to rotate people around. And special thanks to the CNCF for sponsoring the t-shirt giveaway. All right, with that, we ready to get started? Audience, we'd love to know how the audio and video is sounding. That always helps out. And with that, are we ready, panel? Everyone wave. Okay, today's first question is from Scotty Lee. Says, is there an RBAC rule generator or a tool of some kind like there is for IAM policies? And then a link to this policy generator. Or are there any suggestions for having correct rules other than through trial and error? I'm going to put the link to the policy generator that he mentioned into the notes. Panel, any thoughts on this?
So this reminded me of a project that I saw demoed at KubeCon in Copenhagen last year, which is Jordan Liggett's audit to RBAC thing. I'm just going to post a link. And basically it watches the audit log for the API calls that a particular user or service count requests. And then assuming that you want to allow those calls, it generates the RBAC for you. So that's kind of cool, but you do have to have it running first and like failing, and then eventually you'll get the right RBAC.
Any other tips on here or any other tools? Anyone from the audience have a tool? Feel free to post it. Make sure we at Scotty Lee there. So
yeah, I've also looked at, there is a tool called kubectl RBAC, I think, which also does this. And yeah, basically also you need to turn on audit policy and it will generate basically RBAC for you. The other option is actually Kubernetes comes with like default roles. So you should, if your application suits the default role, you might be able to use just that.
okay, and as always, feel free to whack the URLs into chat there so people have them. Any other RBAC tools that people want to shout out since we're on the topic of RBAC?
There is a really good kubectl plugin that I'm looking for right now that sort of like give you a nice sort of at least printout of all the like RBAC roles and things like that for specific things. Awesome.
And panel, if you have any, feel free to just whack them in there. Lucas, hello from Italy. Lucci from Romania. I hope I got that right. Jeremy from the US. Vidya Sagar from Bangalore. I hope I got that right. Thanks everybody for joining. Moving on to our next question comes from Maxat. Says, I'm using, hi, I have a question about Kube Scheduler. I'm using 1.12.9 version, and as I understood from the logs of Kube Scheduler doesn't have a -- secure port flag. But here in the documentation, and then there's a link, there's an explanation about -- secure - port. Why so? Also, the explanation about -- port is confusing me a lot. I think there's some sort of mistake. What's the true way in Kube Scheduler to use TLS? And let me just give a link to the docs that they mentioned.
I'm not sure explicitly about 112, but I'm thinking I look at 114 right now. And there definitely is a secure port on here listed in the flags on do like -- help.
I think like part, like the -- part was deprecated, sort of is deprecated. It's still available, but yeah, it's deprecated. And I think the issue is that basically you might have set like both flags. You only need to set one flag. Other than that, I think we would need to look at the logs why your scheduler is not starting. Because like secure part should be working.
Yeah, so I see -- port there in the like man page that you posted, right? But he's talking about -- secure - port.
Yeah, but it's also in the doc if you search for secure port.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so I think like that, like typically I had the mistake where I set both the part and secure part, and then it doesn't work. So basically make sure that only a single of those is set. Yeah.
So one or the other.
Yeah, one or
Okay,
the other.
all right. Well, hopefully that helps out. And if not, the way follow-up questions work, I should have mentioned this earlier, is if we answer your question and you have a follow-up question, feel free to just ask again, and then we'll come back to you. There also might be cases where we might ask you to do something, and then we'll move on to the next question and then get back to you. So, all right, moving on. Next question is from Tom Kirkpatrick. Thanks for joining us. He says, my question is about exposing TCP services. How can I expose a TCP service on GKE with Kubernetes/Helm and ensure that the real IP is forwarded to the service? I understand that I need the load balancer to be configured to use he probably means proxy protocol for this to work, but have not found a way to configure this using Kubernetes.
So I'm not explicitly sure with GKE, but like usually you just provision a service type load balancer, and that should forward all traffic, for that specific P to that explicit service.
Is Tom online? Let's see if he can. I see he's typing. That's good. Let's give him a sec for that. He says it forwards the traffic, but not the IP.
Oh, you're looking for the actual like IP in the header?
So this uses that export. Well, it's in the chat. People can read along. And people are typing. Oh, this is interesting. FC says on GK with a load balancer type on your service, you will get a layer 4 TCP load balancer, so no header is injected. And then Tom goes on to say proxy protocol is supposed to support this as I understand it.
Yeah, as far as I know, you should just get a like an actual IP being forwarded to them. Let's see. Yeah, as FC said. Are you using are you using like an ingress controller that you're mapping the traffic to?
This says it can be done manually. Let's have a look. Okay, so Bob, keep an eye on this conversation here. We're going to let that develop for a second, and then we'll move on, and then we will come back to this as it looks like a bunch of people are typing right now. So let's come back to that in a few minutes. Chris Short, hey, good morning, Chris says, I do have a question for office hours. Is there a good walkthrough of taking a Go app from binary to fully managed web-facing application? He wants TLS, ingress, replica set, config / the goods. So this feels like an example document, right?
Yeah, well, I wasn't sure if he was looking for a doc or if he was looking for like a YouTube video.
Yeah.
I know that there are plenty of examples for both, just from like my ancillary Googling from my day job. However, I like don't have a go-to, here's what I reference.
Like, I wonder if there's like a
It seems like something we should do.
like, is there a Helm chart where you're just like, throw me any Go binary and I do stuff that has all the goodies? I'm wondering.
Well, that wouldn't work too well because like the Helm chart still needs to be application aware for it to be effective.
Okay.
Helm has not achieved sentience yet.
Doesn't that what V3 does?
That's, ooh.
Sorry.
Okay. So FC goes on to say, moving back to our question here, says, interesting, the current implementation of Cloud Controller Manager does not set it. And then Alib Aleb F says, says there currently is no way to configure proxy protocol in Kubernetes on GKE load balancer. So Tom's now asking for options. So what are his options? Nginx Ingress supposedly supports it, but I've not had success getting that to work either. I'm not sure if Contour supports this. Anybody?
I mean, the next thing I would be doing is looking at Contour and traffic, but I don't know them well enough to actually answer.
Yeah, and then Aleb goes on to add, you can create a load balancer manually in the console and use service type equals node port, adding the IPs. Now several people are typing to that. Okay, moving on while that continues to develop. SRGNR, welcome, says, I do have one question / problem. I've created an ingress for my service to expose the ingress Nginx, but I'm not getting address when I check with kubectl get ing. And the address field is empty even after sometimes. I'm assuming that means after a while. Please help me understand and fix my issue. Any idea what's going on here?
So this sounds like the person doesn't have ingress controller working correctly. So basically, nothing is attaching the correct address. So I would definitely check whether Kubernetes, basically Nginx ingress controller is actually working. And like there is a deployment that is actually running, and yeah, it looks healthy.
Yeah. That, and I would also make sure that whatever the load balancer they're using is actually doing things. Because if Nginx ingress isn't actually getting an IP, the Nginx ingress deployment might actually be healthy, but it's still not fetching an external IP.
Yeah. So where is this actually being hosted? Or if you're running bare metal, are you using something like Metal LB to sort of function as a bare metal service type load balancer provider?
That question was for you, SRGNR, and then we'll see if you respond. Lots of load balancer ingress questions today. Keep it up. FC goes on to say that the Google ingress controller, if you use that, you will get the header. And that conversation continues. Luca Lanciani, welcome, asks, the official documentation to set up an HA control plane node suggests that you use kubadmin init for the first node and kubadmin join for the next nodes. We are generating all the certificate and bootstrap tokens in advance and using the following configuration for all 3 master nodes, and then a whole bunch of YAML. We seem to be able to create a cluster just by running kubadmin init on all the nodes. Anything wrong or particular downside of using this approach? So I do know that the HA stuff for the control plane is brand new, but it doesn't really say what version of Kubernetes. Does that say in this question here? Any ideas on this one? While I look up the kubeadmin documentation.
Yeah, I think this actually might work because kubeadm init would generate certificates, but because the person actually is placing it in correct directory, it would actually skip that. It would also skip core DNS deployment and basically kubeproxy because they are already there. So I think this, I'm not sure what could go wrong with this approach. So yeah.
Yeah, so he says the version he's on is 1.14. Let me just look at I literally just looked at the refresh docs before I went on holiday on this. So any other ideas here?
Obviously, kubeadm join is a bit better because it's officially supported way of doing HA cluster. So it might work, but it might work in future and etc. So I would be careful with this approach.
Yeah, let me look here for the HA stuff. I know there was a blog post on this recently. Sorry, it's hard to blog and host at the same time. So this is the blog post I'm talking about, and I think it does mention the HA stuff. Yeah, see, the only difference is you have to pass the -- control plane flag to kubeadmin join, and that will set up the HA. So I'm not sure if you're aware of that one, Luca. But that is 1.15 only, I believe. I don't know if that goes all the way back to 1.14. But I see you're typing, so let's see. Let's see what he's saying. All right. Anything else coming out of the this IP forwarding issue here? Looks like people are still talking about that. Okay, so he says he's following that, but it assumes that you still have the first node already running. With our approach, you can start all 3 nodes at the same time. I don't think that's a problem, but I am not an expert. What I would do in this case is I would pass this along to the kubeadmin channel, where the team does do support. I don't see why it would be a problem. Does anybody?
And usually there's at least,
Yeah.
You usually like to have at least one leader sort of decide and get things into a happy state before booting up the others. It's the only thing.
Yeah. So let us know how that goes, Luca. That's an interesting case I had not heard of before. Moving on to Tom has a second question and says, I'm currently, hey, if you ask 2 questions, you get twice as much chance to win the t-shirt, Jeff.
Oh, sorry.
He's currently in a node upgrade and it's been running for about 45 minutes. There's only 2 node pools each with a single node. It seems to be taking a lot longer than it should. Should I be worried? Anything I could do about it? So first things first, where do you guys usually monitor stuff when you're doing a node upgrade? Like, are you tailing a certain log or?
So at least I start with like a node drain. So like usually node drain can take a while if you have like pod disruption budget set up, and then we block your drain until your application is sort of all moved out from that node. So this might actually take a bit. And yeah, I usually look at kubectl described node and look what's going on, actually getting the nodes. And there is also a kube control cluster info, which actually also shows like versions and yeah, basically progress.
With 2 node pools with single nodes each, it won't actually be able to fail anything over. If there's a single node, it can't actually do it properly.
Right. So if you have 1 node and you try to drain it, it would just sit there, right?
Do those node rollouts not bring up a new one?
GKE UI and using the G-Cloud CLI. He goes, yeah, that crossed my mind, but it's started now. And everything is.
Is there any way you can add a new one? Is there any? I don't use GKE, but if you can add a new node while it's still rolling out, that might help. I would have thought, to be safe, they would bring in a new one, then do the drain, and then take the old one away. But I guess that's not happening.
Yeah, I've tried that. It's a bit interesting because they actually lock your UI and you can't actually edit like your instance count anymore. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, so he's asking, how can I cancel it or get a new node into the mix? I would assume you could just add a new node at any time, right?
If it's locked during the upgrade, he can't expand the pool.
Oh.
Yeah.
Honestly, this is, if we have any GKE experts in the channel or something like that, that'd be useful.
Yep.
So I guess at the moment it's just trying to evict them. Like, if you can deal with some downtime, you could just forcefully delete the pods and that would allow the node to go away. But obviously, it's not ideal. You really want to have this evicted and safely moved over. But it seems really weird that they do this without bringing in new capacity first. That really seems a bit strange. Have you got the cluster autoscaler or anything on?
Let me see. I'm going to look up.
Yeah, I'd also be interested in knowing what the pod state is on any of those nodes. Are they just hanging, running? What?
And you could manually go in there and scale all your deployments, whatever, down to 0. So the only thing that might be blocking would be any of the normal like sort of support services.
So would that work when Lucius says, just stop the pod?
If you delete the pods that are on it, then that should allow it to go away. Like, I assume when they're doing this, they're doing like a drain that ignores the daemon sets and stuff. So the sort of main running pods you can get rid of, but that's not really ideal. Not the best answer. I don't know what else you could do at this point.
Yeah. So let's do this first. Let's move this to a threaded conversation so it doesn't get messed up. And then, Tom, are you on #GKE? I think as we could probably put a feeler out there, and I could definitely start to ping the GKE people. I know if it helps to get that going. Just a reminder for those of you who don't know, #GKE is on here. Just as a general rule, we do have, usually cloud providers do have channels on our Slack, and they are they're usually around where you can get help. And then next time I see a Googler, I'll make sure they sync up with you. Ditto for Amazon, Microsoft, and all that other good stuff. So with that, let's start doing that. Let's move this to a threaded conversation so we don't take up too much time, and then get the cloud provider people involved as soon as we can. Sound good, Tom? All right. Moving on, Linance says from Finland, awesome. It says, I have a weird Istio issue earlier this week. Virtual host did not get added to the ingress gateway. Nothing obvious in the logs. What would be a proper way to open an issue for these hard to debug, reproduce issues? I dumped all the logs, but redacting all personal information is really tedious with thousands of log lines. Should one just open an issue, describe the problem, and try to provide a subset or relative logs? My issue got resolved by reinstalling Istio altogether. So this could probably apply to Kubernetes as well. So or many of this stuff. When it gets really hairy, what do people do here? Do you just like call your support person and pray for the best, or what?
Honestly, I don't know for Istio, but like for Kubernetes, we generally don't like these complex issues being posted in GitHub if it's like unless it is possibly a bug. Mm-hmm. It's better to go to like Stack Overflow or like the discuss forum post there, and then if it is a bug, then raise it up in GitHub, pointing it towards pointing towards the discuss or Stack Overflow issue as a reference.
Sure. So I guess the first step would be determine whether it's actually a bug in the software or whether it's a site issue or a configuration issue or you're doing it wrong in there somewhere, kind of thing. Okay. Any other tips?
Yeah, I usually go on like Slack channels and like ask people there. Typically, they can help you figure out whether this is a bug or like just some misconfiguration.
Okay. Any other tips?
+1 for the Slack or Stack Overflow.
Okay. All right, moving on. Suresh asks, what's the value for cube-reserved, system-reserved on your cluster's nodes? How do you profile it? I've given CPU equals 250 M and memory equals 256.
We had some fun with this recently and changed ours. So we originally had it as 100 M for CPU and 256 for memory. Now these resource values actually only act as part of the scheduling. They're not limits. So if you have your node like workloads overcommitted anyway, then these are kind of useless, to be honest. We have them set. We've now changed them to 100 memory CPU and 512 meg for the RAM. But if you are overcommitting a lot and your nodes, like your pods, go up to their limits and over their limits, and your limits are set to twice this CPU or memory on your node, this doesn't actually really help. And you can still get kubelet and stuff panicking. And we had our like kernel level wound killer killing kubelet, Docker, and proxy. And then at that point, the node is toast. I don't know how accurate you can get these, that it's actually going to help.
What's the default? Anyone know offhand? I'm just curious if this is something. Like you get different on each cloud, or I was just curious.
I don't think there is one.
It certainly used to be that it was just 0.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Moving on. Cold brewed brew. All right. I'm starting to leverage some jobs for some admin cluster management to work within the cluster. I have some jobs that I want scheduled, but others that I want executed not on a schedule, just want to have them as one-offs. What are some suggested ways for managing these types of jobs, since I can't resubmit the job in order to run it again as I receive an error as a job already exists with that name? Is it just to submit the jobs with some unique name? This feels like a Jeff question.
I'm going to have to reread it because I was noticing that you skipped over a question. And then I was
okay.
reading
I'll come back to that one.
over.
All right.
So let me reread this.
Mart, I'll get back to your question.
Sorry. I read this earlier and had a thought about the generate name field in the metadata. I believe that's a thing you can do. So you put like generate name true and it'll like append. When you do the create, it'll append like a suffix to your name. So you can have them. This is how like pods get their random names and replica sets get their random names. So you could have it with the same prefix, which is what's in the name field when you apply that. But yeah, then they'll always end up with a suffix. I'll see if I can find some documentation for that, but I think that might work for what you want.
That is exactly what I was thinking.
Excellent. All right, moving on to Mort's question while you posted the link. Sorry, I skipped you here.
I do want to point out, this question is even more a Bob and Jeff question than the last one.
Yes, I figured this. We are rolling out a test Kubernetes cluster for various researchers at our university to learn about Kubernetes and eventually use it in production. To separate concerns, we isolate projects based on namespace. When we increase users of the clusters, we would scale up existing cluster with new nodes or multiple clusters. What should we consider in making this decision to university researchers who do this every day?
It depends on your workloads. It also depends on your scale. Increasing the size of your cluster might be fine if you're like just doing very, very small workloads, like I want to say 20 to 30 nodes. And the reason I say that is a lot of the researcher workloads that we see tend to just absolutely throttle nodes. And depending on what you're running on those clusters, it may not perform very well. Also, if you are running ancient Java-based software that is not Java 10, it's going to ignore all of your limits and totally hose your nodes. So that's when you should look into spinning up multiple clusters and breaking up workloads that way. More information is needed, but we are happy to nerd out about this. This is kind of our day job. So please give us more info.
Just as like we run most of our users in one shared cluster, but we have like very strict pod security policies and things like that in place. And we also enforce that like all pods must have like resource requests and limits set, and as well as like resource quotas on namespaces.
And if they don't supply that, we have some very restrictive defaults to the point where their stuff probably won't run.
So they have to set it, otherwise, yeah.
Yep,
that's clever. Is there a place either at the CNCF or in Kate's where you researcher folks hang out, and we can loop this person into the Cool Kids Club?
So there, if memory serves me correct, he's actually already in the academia channel in CNCF. But if not, there's that channel, and there is also a CNCF research user group that is sort of in the inception phase.
Sweet. If you could post those links so that people on the stream could check them out, for those listening that are interested in joining that kind of stuff, we always like to see that. Sweet. Anything else for this researchy stuff? Okay, next question comes from Venkat Nagapan. Sorry, we're trying to catch up to the questions, but you guys are just overwhelming us with questions. That's really great. It says, is there a way to find out how long a pod was in a specific state? For example, in crash loop backoff. I can get to some information using JSON path. It has information like different conditions and last change timestamp from that state, but couldn't figure out a way to find exactly how long it was in that state. Thanks.
I believe if you do like a kubectl describe of the pod, it'll actually show like all of its state changes. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like I could do it right now. I'm almost positive that I'm right. But like at the bottom of kubectl describe pod, it'll actually describe like container has started, container has aired, and it'll have the timestamp of when that event occurred.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Good news from Tom says we got past the GKI issue in GKE channel FYI by the deleting the pods. Thanks. Sweet. Love it when we don't lose anybody's cluster. Okay. So Venkat, hopefully that answers your question. If not, come back. But Jeff is 95% positive that he's 95% positive.
Yeah,
Lucian,
I have.
Go ahead.
I actually have a pod right now that's going through that horrible crashback loop thing. So I have the output from that shows what Jeff was talking about. I'll put that in the thread.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for that.
Yeah, also, I just had an idea. If you actually run like cube state metrics and Prometheus, then basically you can get a Prometheus metric and just actually like see the graph for it.
Yeah, and FC points out events get regularly cleared though. So for a long history, you're going to need to store those events somewhere else, as you mentioned. Yep, and Omicronian confirms, yeah, the events will trail off over time. Okay, anything else for this one? All right. Lucian asks, I have a question about ingress. My cluster is in GKE. What ingress should I use? GKE ingress or Nginx ingress? Also, I need CORS to be enabled.
So I know Nginx ingress can support cores, but if you're in GKE, I imagine it's easier just to use GKE's ingress. But I don't use GKE, so I can't tell you how to enable things like cores. I can't imagine they don't have support for that.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to say they do.
I see people typing, so let's see what the community has to say on this one. I would assume that if your cloud provider provides an ingress that meets all your needs, it's always a safe bet. Omicronian says core settings can be controlled with annotations on Nginx, not sure on GKE. Let's see if someone can confirm on GKE. We'll just give it a second there, and then we'll let the conversation continue.
I think this is actually the most GKE questions we've gotten in a single office hours.
We have. We might have to ask one of them to just hang out. So let's see, a whole bunch of people typing in a whole bunch of different threads. Okay, while we wait for the answer to that one, Vidhya Sagar, I hope I got that right, says, I have two questions. Can you please share any article for scraping metrics to Prometheus from systemd process? And two, an article for creating Helm charts, downloading the manifests from Helm charts, override the defaults in Helm charts. I'm referring to this, and then they have a link to this Bitnami article here.
Cool, so I can help with the first part of the question.
Sure.
So for systemd, you can use either node exporter, which has like some amount of systemd metrics, but they are mostly node-based. So the number of systemd units running, basically states, things like that. And there is also, basically I've written a systemd exporter, which we are planning to move onto Prometheus community organization. So yeah, there is not many, like there isn't good docs about it, but I can link you to the repository.
Yeah, toss some links in there. That'd be useful. Also, does anybody in chat have links for stuff like this if they have? I know everyone always has an opinion on metrics, so feel free to toss in some URLs there. As I said earlier, those of you that are listening on YouTube, we'll collect all these URLs and put them in the YouTube description after the fact. Let's see. I don't, like, as far as articles for creating Helm charts and all that stuff, the internet is like really full of them. So I don't really have any specific one in mind, unless anybody in chat has like a really good one that they like, or any really strong opinions on an article. And then Maxac goes on to ask, my question about Kube Scheduler. Here's a login link configs, also cut from docs that says about -- port that use HTTP and set 0 that disables HTTPS. And there's an image in Slack. Do you guys see that image? I'm gonna go ahead and post a link to that thread. Oh, cool. Put the image there as well. So if you click on that, let me see if I can expand it for the audience. Will I regret this? Yes. Okay. Not gonna do that. Okay, so any new ideas here with this problem?
Pretty sure that's just a typo in the help message, and it should say to disable HTTP rather than HTTPS.
Interesting.
Honestly, I have to spin up an instance of 112 to actually play with it.
So is typo the best theory we've got so far then? So you could just try it, you think?
You could spin up a Minikube instance and give it a shot.
Okay, who wants to take this one? Or any next steps that we can provide?
I think it's going to come down to one of us is going to have to spin up a Minikube cluster and actually test it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of us could do it.
I'm gonna flip a coin. Max wants to add, okay, what about kube scheduler -- secure port in 1.12.9?
I mean, a 112 cluster is going to be a 112 cluster. They shouldn't be changing any of the command line arguments between dot versions.
Right.
Alternative option, upgrade to 113.
Yeah. I don't know if we want to officially recommend that all the time. So Joel, if you want to, if you think it's a typo, should you just try it without the S or with the S? Sorry.
I mean, I don't know. I think
Okay.
I remember that in the past you used to be able to have port and secure port set, certainly on the Cube API server. Though I'm not actually sure what the secure port is for on the scheduler. The only thing I thought it served was metrics and the health seed, but
Okay.
maybe I missed something.
All right. So it sounds like we're kind of out of ideas on this one. So we're gonna have to table this and then either come back to it or pass along the information to someone else. So sorry about that, but keep us posted as you do your research, and we'll do our best throughout the week to help you out and keep posting your information in the channel. Moving on, because we are running out of time. Venkat says, I've been using Kubernetes cluster provision in an Alexi environment using kubeadmin until 1.14, but since 1.15, I couldn't do kubeadmin in it, and it's failing because I pass fail. Swap on equals false, my favorite, as kubelet arguments, and since 1.15, it's deprecated, moved to kubelet configuration. Anyone have experience using cluster in LXC, and what do you think? By the way, since you mentioned kind, I'm happily using it. Thanks. Always love to see more kind people. So any tips on this with the swap in LXC here? There's no way to.
Honestly, don't really know anyone using LXC.
Yeah.
Most people are either using like Docker or Containerd.
Yeah, because you can't disable swap inside a LXC container, and I don't want to disable swap on the host machine. Although if you disable swap on the host machine, Lexi would work. Except you don't want to do that, right? Let me see what he says. Because I think the Lexi container will just inherit what the host swap is.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I read the question around provision in an LXC environment.
So he's using Lexi as lightweight VMs here, not as like a container runtime. I don't think you could use Lexi as a container runtime anyway, right? No idea on this one other than disabling swap on the host machine, but Is there an argument that you can pass for kubeadmin to ignore the swap thing? Well, that doesn't sound like a good idea either, right?
When you do the init, I think you can tell it to ignore that. But yeah, not sure you'd want to.
Yeah, then you'd run in an unsupported configuration, and that's probably worse. Yeah, I don't really have any. I see a bunch of people typing, but I don't really have any recommendations here. Except maybe if the host machine's entire job is to host Lexi containers for Kubernetes, then it might be a good idea to do it on the host, right? Yeah, and Venkat points out ignore pre-flight checks equals all or something similar. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I would try that. Or maybe on the host, but I don't know. I would be hesitant about forcing kubeadmin to run in like a kind of an unconfigured thing with swap on, but we'll see. So sorry, we can't get you a better answer, but next time I see the kubeadmin folks, I'll definitely ask. Lucian asks, what happens if node affinity is not set on all pods and I upgrade the cluster?
I think this is the one I answered in Slack. If node affinity is, like, if nothing has a node affinity, you should be able to upgrade it, no problem. Things should just shuffle around.
Yep. It's like the what's supposed to happen actually happens. So that's a good one. Okay, we're actually catching up to the queue of questions. So feel free to ask more questions here. Those of you, thanks for participating. We have record amount of viewers so far, live viewers, 113 of you this morning. So thank you very much for listening in. Martin 31821 asks, what's the best approach to add pod security policy to an existing / updated cluster? We don't have any PSPs in place at the moment, but would like to utilize PSP in the near future.
So I would, I guess, would firstly create all the pod security policies with everything enabled. So basically all namespaces can do, like all the pods can do whatever. And then basically just only then turn on the admission flag, which enforces pod security policies. Because if you don't create roles before, it's gonna like start denying everything.
Okay.
So yeah, so you definitely want to do that. It's actually in official documentation. And then and then after that, just like slim down your roles to something which makes sense.
Yep. You described exactly what I was going to say. That's essentially how you have to turn on PSPs in a cluster.
Okay. Anything else regarding PSPs? Okay, Venkat has a follow-up question. Question about API versions from different resources and kubectl API-versions. How do you manage the resources you've deployed in the cluster with a certain API version supported in that version of Kubernetes, and then upgrading your cluster to a later version? Are all the versions backwards compatible, or do we have to keep updating the manifest and redeploy all the resources? And I'm going to add in something here. If we could talk a little bit about the API deprecation policy and all that good stuff, that would be really great. Who wants this one?
And in general, they're pretty good about forward and backward support, at least for major versions. Like, you just have to ask people or have people upgrade in that duration of time.
Mm-hmm.
The duration of time, by the way, I think by default is 3 versions. So if a deprecation is announced, say in 1.13, it is actually removed in 1.16.
Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, how do users keep track of what's going to be deprecated? I'm asking leading questions now because I would love, in my mind, I would love to be able to have a page, that kind of shows you what APIs are going to be deprecated. So in the release notes, I know we do this. We say, hey, blah, blah, blah is being removed. You've got 2 more versions until this thing, and then Jordan Liggett gives me a thing to repost, right? But generally, how are users expected to kind of keep up with this? Are you checking the release notes every release? How do you all do it?
Yeah, usually I think they are in changelog. So this is good information to. And I think there was like a document about this, and if I can find it, I'll definitely post a link.
Okay.
So, I mean, speaking of leading questions, I would say the nice and shiny new release notes website could definitely fill this role, especially what?
Yeah, plop that in the channel.
Already done.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So Jeff's been working on this. I think it's useful. Like, I think what would be cool is if you had a site that like said, what version are you on? You do a Dropbox. What version are you upgrading to? You do a Dropbox, and then it just tells you.
I mean, I have grand plans for if I, had absolutely no life and can do this all the time. But that is an eventuality, I believe.
Yeah, and Omicron says maybe a couple versions prior there should be a warning given. I think we do for the big ones, right?
So my example was if they announce a deprecation in 1.13, it is absolutely removed in 1.16. They actually give a reminder every release up to that point saying, hey, you have 2 releases before this is removed. Hey, there is 1 more release till this is removed. And then in big bold letters in 1.16, they go, this is removed. You need to act on this. So
he has a follow-up question. Does kubectl or Clank Go spit out a warning when this happens? Because that would be dope.
Yes, I don't know.
Yeah.
The big problem is so many people will just, you grab examples and things like that. It's like the outdated blog posts that will have references to like extensions v1, beta 1. And if you go take a look at like a lot of the Helm charts, even in the like stable repo, they're still using like extensions v1, beta 1 or v1, beta 2.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is just a problem I think is hard to solve, and we're going to, whether that's a site or we just keep spamming the API warnings and stuff, but it's definitely an area we could improve on. And you're right. There's so many examples. We get people coming to this all the time with the Nginx example that's broken that I still don't know how people are finding it, and yet they are. So definitely we could do something there. Narinda Kumar asks, is it possible, advisable to downgrade a Kubernetes version? So let's say I do an upgrade. I accidentally now don't have an API that I depended on because I wasn't paying attention. Help, what do I do? Just as an example. Jeff, I saw you giving some tips here in Slack. Let's talk about it a little bit. However, you said you don't advise a downgrade, but upgrading is easy.
I think you're referring to me and not Jeff.
Oh, sorry, I meant Bob.
I know we get mixed up quick though.
I know. I could hear you both over there somewhere.
Upgrading clusters is pretty easy these days. Things have been sorted out with kubeadm, especially for that. And if you're going with like a vendor's product, upgrading, like they tend to handle all the pre-flight checks and things of that nature. Downgrading is a bit more complicated. Like I don't know of like anything that really automates the downgrade process for you. I know it's possible. One thing you definitely want to do is take like an etc.d snapshot or backup before you're doing any sort of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. So just as an example, I know you both said that you use one cluster. But I would assume it's common for certain people not to do an upgrades. They just spin up the new version, move stuff over, keep the old, move the load balancers over, keep the old one running, and then after you pass X amount of tests / time, you kill the old one as opposed to upgrading in place. Any thoughts on that approach? Sort of like a red-green approach to clusters, or black-red, depending on what your jam is.
So this is sort of going back. kubeadm can actually be used okay for downgrading clusters if necessary by specifying the explicit versions, and it will try and do like a downgrade plan map the diff, but
Mhm.
that's something I've never personally tried.
What have you done when an upgrade? Have you had an upgrade gone bad?
So we sort of had, and it was like really weird. We just deployed a new version for a bit. Then something like, I don't know what went wrong, but something went wrong, and we decided to downgrade. And then there was like, we didn't do any HCD backup restore. So there was like a newer version, which like Kube API, I think by default converts all the resources to the newest version internally. So it went, so basically we all our resources went a bit like really weird and we couldn't change them anymore. So basically it's hard, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise to do that.
Yeah, I would assume, depending on how robust your etcd backup and restore capability is, I feel like that would be the crux of whether you can pull that off, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, and with that, we are out of time. Thanks all of you for joining us. We had 125 people join us today. That's really awesome for the live stream. That is a new record, so thank you very much. Feel free to hang out in office-hours. Post questions throughout the week if you want. What we do is that when we do this next month, it's always the third Wednesday of every month. We'll collect questions. We like to see stories when people get stuck in something and they come back and they fix it and then they tell the community. That's all really wonderful. And with that, let's do the t-shirt raffle. Jeff, guaranteed to be random. We're giving away 2 Kubernetes t-shirts today, and none of us seem to be wearing it. I'm wearing the wrong Kubernetes t-shirt. But let's see who the winners are. I think you can just...
I'm wearing the right one.
Oh, yeah, show it. Show off. There you go. That is the t-shirt we give away. And we're just waiting for the not random number generator here. And you can help us out by, so the YouTube URL is in the Slack channel up top. Feel free to tweet it, share it, like it, send it to a friend, that sort of thing. I usually schedule these a week in advance, so we have the nice YouTube URL there, so that you can share it throughout the month. And thanks everyone for joining us. Just waiting on the dice roll here. It's okay. Who's gonna win? Who's gonna win the t-shirt? So Nagarajan and Suresh, you've won the t-shirts. I will PM you right after this and give you a code to the CNCF store. And with that, happy cubing, everybody, and we'll see everybody next month. Remember, third Wednesday of every month. Thanks, everyone, and have a good day. Panel, wave goodbye.